Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, man.
Hey, you were prepared for that time. I'm really proud of you, man.
I was wondering if it was going to happen this time.
Yeah, come a long way. I get everybody on the monthly review. I put everybody in and just like I let that play for like 20 seconds and then just brought everybody in. They were like, what? Anyway, how are you doing, Brian?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Now, I'd like 2 eggs over hard.
Never ready for that.
Yeah, that's the way it works, man. I appreciate it.
I may have been ready once, but,
Anyway, Brian, what's up, man? It's been a while since we've done a conversation with some comic creators. That's nice alliteration, isn't it?
It is very nice alliteration. Yeah. And glad to get back into it, man. Yeah, it has been a bit. And they're always fun. And glad we're back into doing it.
All right. So tonight we have two gentlemen in. One of them is a writer. One of them is an artist. They're both artists in our hearts, though. But we have the writer of Vinyl, Plastic, The Ride, Hard Place, lots of other stuff out there. And we have the artist of the upcoming book that this guy is writing called the Beware the Eye of Odin. It sounds super cool. Brian, are you ready?
I am.
Let's bring him in. Everybody throw out a station for your very own Doug Wagner and Tim Odland. Here they are. Station.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
And please excuse Tim. He's under deadline, so he's got to.
Yeah.
Doug's like, hey, by the way, you got to be drawing while we're doing this interview. That's what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know if Doug's over here or over here, over my shoulder. But
he's over your shoulder. That's perfect, right?
He's watching me. So.
Thank you all for being here so much, and thank you out there in the chat for checking it out. So, Doug, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's been a fun day. So, how about you?
It's been a fun day as well. Had a nice, relaxed, chilled day at work, slinging comic books, and then just thinking I get to go and hang out with Brian, Doug, and Tim tonight, and I'm super excited for it. So thank you for being here. Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah? How's that cover going?
It's going pretty good. It's due tomorrow, and I've just got some colors left to do.
I love it. So, Doug's probably like, by the way, deadline's tomorrow, but we're doing the show tonight. So I hope you're ready, right?
Yep. Get it together.
I
figured I could just talk. It might relax me if I work on this while talking to you guys too.
Oh yeah, so. Please do. And just, I mean, that way we can all be like, this, by the way, this cover was worked on while he was on PCP. So that's nice, like prestigious kind of thing to go to. How did you two hook up for this book?
That's a fun story. You want to tell the first part, or you want me to? Tim? Well, I'll tell you my version. Okay, yeah, let's do different versions. Yeah, I probably can't
rush him on it.
Remember very well, but we have a draw night in Salt Lake. I used to live in Salt Lake, and it was every Tuesday. And if some of the local creators would go to it, and I don't know, I think one time Doug showed up, right? And I don't know, I was talking to someone, they're like, well, this guy's from Park City too. And that's where I lived, in Park City, Utah. And I was like, and he's a writer. And I was like, oh, really? And so I talked to him, and we lived in the same city. We didn't even know it. And just through liking comics and stuff, we just would talk. And eventually we were meeting every so often. And we're like, let's work on something. So I guess that's my version. I mean,
that's a riveting version of that story. Just so you know.
Doug's a storyteller. Well, he might
can you draw us? Can you draw us a sequence of events real quick? I'm just kidding.
A tight 9-panel grid, please. You know, with it. So.
Yeah, I mean, your perspective is just a little bit different. Mine, I moved to Salt Lake, and I'd known Ryan Otley, who's in Salt Lake as well, and so I contacted him on Facebook and said, hey, dude, I wouldn't mind getting lunch or something. I just moved into town. And he said, hey, we do this draw night. You should come. And so I went there and met all the guys that were there. Tim was one of them. And then Tim and I kind of got talking, and we're like, hey, wait a minute, where do you live? And it was like 3 miles from each other. And so then it just became the natural, well, hey, we have to drive up and down this mountain from Park City to Salt Lake. Why don't we just carpool together? And we started carpooling, and that just kind of we started having, a friendship kind of thing. And Tim was like, hey, you want to work on something together? And I'm like, heck yeah. Looking at his art, I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I? Right. And then my favorite part of the story is always, we decided from that day forward, we were going to meet and I can't remember, it was every Wednesday or something for lunch at Taco Bell. And so I call this the Taco Bell Viking book because we came up with this book and the whole story and everything, meeting every Wednesday at Taco Bell.
Oh, that's awesome. New comic book day at Taco Bell.
Yep.
Formed this whole project. That's awesome. Tell us about the project, because I think it sounds super cool and gnarly and a little bit different than what I'm used to seeing from you, Doug. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, this one's, Tim came to me and, we're trying to figure out what we want to work on together. And I'm always like, I always try to, and when I work with an artist, I want them to draw something they love drawing. And so I said, hey, Tim, like, what do you want to do? And he's like, what about Vikings? And I was like, yeah, I can do Vikings. And he's like, and trolls. And I mean, Tim already, he already thought about it, right? He's Vikings and trolls. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, as long as we get to do our take on it, like, I don't want to worry about necessarily like the perfect mythology. I want to do the Doug and Tim mythology. And so we just kind of started bouncing around ideas. And like, as I'm doing this at Taco Bell, I find out like Tim's actually like his family are Vikings. They're from, what is it, Norway, or I don't know what they call Viking land anymore.
Yeah, well, my dad's Norwegian, and I have half my family lives in Norway, and they live in a town called Arendal, which Disney like totally ripped off and like made the generic version Arendal for Frozen. But anyways, my family's from there, and my grandmother was always telling just crazy stories. And my dad would tell me crazy stories like troll stories and stuff that are, I mean, over there they have lots of these troll stories that I don't think a lot of people have heard over here that are pretty amazing. It's like a fairy tale type thing. And I mean, when I was talking to Doug, I was kind of going back to that stuff and thinking about that, and like, there could be there's a story there that we could tell. And so a little bit inspired by the roots, and then I just kind of told him what I would like to do, and Doug took that and ran with it.
That's cool. So does it integrate? So does it integrate some of the stories that you were told growing up?
No. Well, I didn't tell Doug any of those stories.
No,
but
you're afraid it would alter the friendship?
Yeah. Well, I wanted him to be creative, and create his own thing. And I mean, Norse mythology in comics, there's lots of it. I mean, Thor. Thor's an awesome character. I like him, but honestly, he is kind of a bastardization of the original Thor, right? I mean, Walt Simonson's characters, I mean, in his Ragnarok, I mean, that's just another version of Norse mythology. So ours is just kind of taking that base of Norse mythology and then just kind of doing our own thing, telling our own version,
That's awesome. I had an English teacher in high school, and she was awesome. And she taught myth and legend. And so I took that as an elective my senior year. I was super into it. And I remember doing this big presentation as a comparison of Thor and the Aesir in Marvel Comics versus like mythology. And like everybody thought that was so cool because back in, in the 90s, to be in the late 90s, to be into comics, that was a rarity, with a lot of people. It's not like, I guess, today. But I've always been fascinated by it, right? So we know the significance of the Eye of Odin and what that means and all that kind of stuff. So was that your idea, Doug, to kind of center it around that? And like, I guess this is going to be like an everyman who finds this eye or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it became, and and I hate to say like I came up with it, because honestly, it was like Tim and I constantly bouncing ideas back and forth. So it was one of those things where like, it's not like one of us came up with one thing or the other. It was like a true collaborative effort. But I remember we were talking about it. Obviously we know the Eye of Odin, given to the Frost Giant King to kind of keep the peace, kind of thing. And so we started kind of playing with this idea of like, well, what if somebody stole it? And then we came up, like you said, we came up with our everyman character, which is Helgi, which is our kind of our main character, and we see everything through his eyes. And he's been told all these tales like Tim was as a child, of like all these tales to keep you safe and make you not leave your parents' side, all those kind of fun tales that you get from Norse mythology. And we wanted to see it through that character's eyes. And so he gets this Eye of Odin, and the second you touch it, if you're not the proper owner of it, it puts a curse on you. And so if you don't deliver it back to its rightful owner, which happens to be the Frost Giant King, within one moon, well, you die this horrible death of boils and decay. And so, you know, now
That's
he's like,
motivation.
yeah,
there.
exactly. And so he's sitting here holding this eye, you know, and he's talking to Steiger, who's like our one-armed blacksmith in the town. And he's like, so are all these tales true? Because, you know, he's never seen any of this stuff before. So he's having, you know, he's like, so everything my dad told me was true, and I have to return this eye to a frost giant? You know, you're like, are we going to survive this kind of thing?
Huh.
And so that's where it kind of all bloomed from there. And then we got our third character, who's Caitlin, who believes, and she may or may not actually be a Valkyrie, but she believes she is.
Yeah, and Steiger, he's an old warrior who kind of feels like he missed his chance to die in battle, right? So that's kind of where he's coming from.
Okay. Is that the blacksmith you were talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. The one-armed blacksmith.
The one-armed blacksmith, yep.
Okay. I like that. That sounds freaking awesome. That's why when I read that solicitation, I was like, that sounds so wild and so different than plastic or vinyl, right? And then obviously with the influence of Tim there, and I love the collaboration, right? Because that's one of the things about comic books that's truly special. When you're doing television, you're doing movies, you're employing many writers, producers, directors, and artists, right? To like come in and collaborate in on a vision. There's so many hands in that process, right? And with a comic book, it can be one person, it can be two people, 3, 4, 5, but it's so like much of the vision, and it's like the truest sense of collaboration to me, because it's not like you don't know the name of everybody on your team. You know what I'm saying? You guys like work together, and the fact that you came up with this together, and it stems from like a little bit of Tim's family history. That's freaking cool to me. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was working with Doug was awesome because it wasn't like he's like, okay, got this idea, draw it, you know. We like talked this through, and I mean, I brought some ideas, he had some ideas, you know, we talk, you know, we meet once a week and talk about these things, and Doug would come back with this part of the script, and I'd be like, wow, that's really amazing. I never thought of that thing. And, you know, I would tell him like, what about this idea? What can we do here? Or, you know, so, I mean, working with Doug was a pretty rad collaboration. You know, he gave me a lot of opportunities to contribute. So
that's awesome. It probably won't be your entire experience in the industry, obviously, but it's super cool to start that way and to do creator-owned work, stuff that you have a stake in, something that you have a hand in, and publishing this book at Image Comics on its 30th anniversary. How cool is that? We're talking 30 years from the debut of Spawn #1. You're dropping your #1. How does that feel, Tim?
That's pretty amazing. I have this picture I showed Doug. How old are you, Robbie?
I am 40.
Dude, me too.
Nice station.
And I think maybe
we're brothers.
Station. And I think maybe that's why I like your channel so much, is because we have similar tastes, we have a similar background. But I have a picture I showed Doug, which is me at this like janky art table with my brother, and I have Spawn #1, and I'm like 10 years old or something.
Yeah.
Right. So really, I mean, Marvel started it for me, and you know, Batman and all that, 89 Batman. But I really like decided I want to draw comics when Image like started blowing up, right? So I'd say I'm like an Image type kid, and having that my book coming out in the 30 years is pretty cool. I mean,
you're gonna have that banner on it and everything, right? The little 30 years Image. That's really cool. Awesome. I think that's awesome. That was a revolutionary moment in this industry. You know what I'm saying? Like people talk about the heyday of the 80s, the Jim Shooter era, selling tons of comics. The newsstand is active and it's moving, and it built up into the hype of the early 90s. And you know, Image was like the peak of that. Like Image came out at the right time, right? Like if Image would have come out 3 years later, I don't know how that would have worked, you know, but it hit that boom so right. And that was such a serendipitous time, I think, because it brought the focus back on the creators. There was all this talk back in those days that, it's spotlighting the artists, and the artists don't know how to write, and we're the right, you know, and you saw this kind of shift in focus over at the big two, maybe during that time, away from the art. But it's the art is the first thing people see, right? And the story is obviously very important. The writing, you're not going to come back and reread a comic if it's just got a terrible story, unless it's got ultra badass artwork.
Yeah.
But it showed not just the rise of and the importance of the artist, but the fact of like the creator should have some kind of a say. And that's why I love what Doug does, because Doug has pretty much said, you know what, I want to do this my own way. You've done work for hire stuff at DC, I know for sure. And but your awesome work is the stuff that you want to do on your own. I know you work with 12 gauge, right? With like Brian and Kevin and whatnot. So like, tell us about what are your feelings on creatorship and creator ownership, and how did the 12 gauge stuff kind of come around?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on creator ownership and those kind of things. Like, I think I'm going to go back to what you were saying. I think what Image did is they showed that comics could be better, not only visually, but like they can be more, like you can go in several different directions with the story and say something like Wetworks versus Wildcats versus Youngblood, versus Savage Dragon. And when you get to creators, when they're really invested in something, when they love what they're working on, the characters they work on, the stuff just ends up being better. And I think you could argue that with Marvel and DC as well. You can tell when the creators on a book are working together and when they love what they're working on. They believe in the story. Like, take Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo there for a while on Batman, like that Night of Owl stuff. You could tell they were really digging what they were throwing down, and it made it better. And so I think that's the key, and I think that's what Image really showed everybody. Like, if you can get the creators involved and love what they're doing, they will deliver good books. And we've seen the opposite, unfortunately. You've seen that, you're like, you can tell this person doesn't like the character they're working on, or the editor, or something.
Yeah.
And it's just not jiving. With 12 gauge is always an interesting story, because it was one of those deals to where, like, Kevin and I actually met. We were both working in comic shops, and he owned a comic shop in Auburn, Alabama, and I was working at the sister store in Birmingham, Alabama.
War Eagle, baby.
Yeah, and we were talking, and it was like, we got into that mode that I think everybody does, right? You start armchair quarterbacking Marvel and DC. Well, if I was running Marvel, this is what I would do. And we were sitting in his backyard one time, and he said it again, and I was like, why don't we just do it? And he's like, we can't run Marvel. I was like, no, let's just start doing comics. And so we kind of started putting that together. Luckily, at that point, I was really good friends with a lot of the guys from the Gaijin Studios. So Cully Hamner and Brian Stelfreeze, Jason Pearson, those guys. And we reached out to them, and they were like, hell yeah, we're in. And so that just kind of like developed into this, like, okay, well, let's do the ride. And that was the first thing that 12 Gauge put out. And Kevin was kind of like, I'm going to be the president and kind of like the overseer of the business side of things. And Doug, you kind of take care of the creative side of things. And then obviously later on, we brought Brian in to kind of like be the art director. And like, you make sure that everything's on point for the art stuff, because he just knows so much about how to put the books together for print.
Oh, and he's so
ridiculous.
Good. He's so good. Oh my goodness.
And then we obviously now what? Oh, Jesus, it's been 18 years.
That's wild, man.
12 Gauge thing, yeah.
Y'all can vote now.
Yeah,
like collectively, you can go and vote for president.
Well, no, not drink. We're old enough to vote.
That's awesome. Brian, what you got?
Well, yeah, I was wondering. I guess not to make it too general, but what is it about comics in general that draws you to them and wants to create them? Is the form, or just just the love of the form, or love of the media?
Go ahead, Tim.
I don't know. Pretty much, it's like a low budget movie where you don't need like a whole bunch of people to do it. You can create mini movies, pretty much, like tell stories. I don't know. I think I'm kind of a visual person, and growing up had a hard time reading, and comics like really helped me read. And I mean, that's why I got my mom bought me my first comic, because I was struggling at reading, and we were on a family trip, and at a gas station, she got me a comic, and I had to read it. And the funny thing is when I got to the end, it said it was like a Captain America comic, and he goes into this warehouse, and there's a guy with a bomb, and the warehouse blows up, right? And that's it. And I turn the page, and it's like a Dr. Pepper commercial, or an ad, and I'm like, what the heck? What happens, right? And so that was my first taste of, like well, we can find out next week, you know, and ever since then, it's just like, this is a really cool medium. I mean, you can create it yourself, and my interest in drawing and visual storytelling was, I don't know, just like a perfect fit. And then, you know, just kind of took it from there. So
yeah, I can relate to that. That's, I mean, pretty similar, because like very visually oriented and stuff like that. I can just, you know, Robbie can attest, it takes me longer to read comics than other people, I think, because I tend to get lost, you know, looking at it and then, you know, studying the panel arrangements and stuff like that. Yeah. So
yeah, it takes you like what, 6 hours to read a volume of Akira, right?
It took me longer than the average person. That's
I was like, bro, I read one of those in like 40 minutes. What's wrong with you? He's like, oh, you can't get lost, by the way, in Otomo's work. 100%. You just get lost in it. What about you? What about you, Doug? Why do you love comics?
Oh man, you know, it always has a special place in my heart. I love comics. I really do. I love the everything about it. The way it delivers a visual story, you know, and it almost appears as though it's moving, but it's not. Again, just like you guys are saying, I mean, it helped me with reading, as well as I like the fact that it's a little bit more succinct than, say, a prose novel that I have to dig into. But like what Tim's saying, you know, I had friends that, you know, the nerd guys, you know, and like they were all reading Lord of the Rings and that kind of stuff. And at that age, I just couldn't do it. Like it was just too much for me. But I could get into Wolverine in a heartbeat. You know, like, I mean, and you could, you know, talk about those stories and see them in visual. And I love everything about comics. I do. I got obsessed when I was 5 or 6 years old, you know, starting out with stuff like Casper and Flintstones. and I've loved it ever since. Like, I just love the medium. I don't know what it is about it. I'm addicted.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's 5 years old. 5, 6 was when I first started reading them. It was like Byrne, Superman, and like Romita Jr. X-Men and stuff like that. And I just was like eating it up. Secret Wars 2 was like about to launch. I was so freaking, I thought the Beyonder with the hair was like the coolest shit. Like I thought that was so awesome, man.
That was a mullet, right? He had like, he's like a Jerry curl mullet. Like what's going on? I don't know what was going on. He has some Lionel Richie shit going on, man, but I loved it, man. And it had like, there's an energy to it, man. There have been brief times in my life, maybe where I dropped out because I didn't have the money or I was involved super hard in a relationship, but it's literally only been 2 times in my life where that's ever happened. Right. I used to like not eat lunch in school so I could buy comics. Like, I mean, I would do that. It was like, that's $10 that I would get a week. And in those days I could go buy 5 comics with that money. And I love doing it, man. I love this medium. I love that it feels like, you know, I'm a big film guy too. I'm sure everybody here is, right? Because I've seen y'all's work. So like, and it's one thing to watch a movie and be like, man, I love Martin Scorsese. Oh, I love Christopher Nolan. But like when I'm reading a comic book, I feel so directly connected to the people that are creating that I'm just like, this is amazing. This is like very little interference between y'all, the page, and me. You know, and I think that's one of the coolest things about this whole medium of comic books. I think it's the best. Yeah,
because it's one way I look at it is like you know, TV shows and movies and all that stuff. They have that stuff in front of focus groups and all this other stuff. And a lot of comics, you know, you have one editor usually, you know, and it's just a team. So it's really just it's about as clear as you can get from the vision of the story from the creators, you know, with comics.
Yeah, it's like a easy way to share your imagination. You think about being a kid and I don't know, playing G.I. Joes with your neighbor friend, you know, you would have in your mind, you'd have this movie going on, right? And your friend might be doing the same thing, but might have a little bit different movie. But I mean, comics is a way to just really share what your imagination.
Yeah, and in a collaborative kind of way too, right? Like, I remember I used to do that thing where you'd lay out your toys. I pick a character, you pick a character. I pick another character, you pick another character. We're going to come up with something. But then I got so tired of playing with other people because I didn't like their ideas about where the story should go. So I would literally like plot out my own, like I would do like 12 episode seasons and I would act them out. Like, and like, it's so nerdy. And I'm not even like talking about, a 5-year-old Robbie. I'm talking about like a 13-year-old Robbie. So it's ridiculous, man. But I really have the best Galactus story. Like the answer,
Ooh.
Black Bolt. Black Bolt's the answer. It's always been the answer. It's right there in front of everybody's faces. Black Bolt is the answer to Galactus, or at least I thought so at like 13 or 14. But Beware the Eye of Odin is dropping in June. It's a 4-issue series, right?
Correct. All oversized issues.
Oh, nice.
Oh, great. Cool.
Man, you're really working Tim, Doug.
Yep. Well, here's the fun story about that. Tim and I laugh about this almost every time we talk because we had the biggest epic fail ever when we came up with this book. Initially, it was supposed to be 40 pages.
Yeah, can I just add something?
Yes.
Part of it is I had never really drawn a comic, you know? So part of it was like, well, let's start with something small. Doug, let's start with like a small, like reasonable thing, right?
And then, I would add 2 pages. Tim would add 2 pages. I'd add, and then it somehow ended up being 162 pages of our 40-page
Nice
one shot.
Yeah.
So then when actually the funny story is like how Eric Stevenson and Image even discovered it. He was at, what con was it in Minnesota?
Oh, I don't know. We've had a few that kind of just died off and came back, but there was a convention and I saw that Eric Stevenson was going to be there and a few other people. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna see if I can meet him. I saw that he was looking at portfolios. He was looking for pitches.
Oh, nice.
And so I was just like, originally me and Doug were planning to do a web comic just to put it out there, right, for free. And we were just going to finish it and then figure out what to do with it. So I went to this convention, saw Eric Stevenson there, and he was looking at portfolios. So I thought I'd just have him look at my pages to see if I get any kind of input or a gauge on it. And when he saw him, and he's like, yep, this is definitely something we would publish. And so I was like, oh, really? I was like, cool. So he gave me his card, and he's like, so are you the writer on this? And it was a big book with lots of pages, no dialogue or anything. And I was like, no, actually, Doug Wagner is a writer. He's like, oh, I know Doug. He's my friend. And so, yeah, I mean, at this point, Doug had done plastic, and that's where you're at with your career, right?
Yep.
He had done all these things, and plastic was his most current thing. And then he's like, oh, okay. So I never emailed Eric, but Eric did contact Doug.
Yeah, that Monday, the day he got back from that con, he was like, hey, what's up with this Viking book? And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, how do you know about this?
He's like, why didn't you tell me about this, Doug?
And so Tim calls the same day and he's telling me the story. And I'm like, okay, now this is all making sense. Like, I hadn't even responded to Eric's email yet because I didn't know what to say. Like, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking. Are we talking about the same book? And then Tim's telling me this story, and I'm like, oh, well, I guess I should respond to it.
You were ghosting him otherwise. You were like,
I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. And so then a couple of years later, like, we're getting ready, we're thinking about getting the book and putting it out, and we weren't sure how interested Eric really was. And so I just sent an email to Eric, and I said, hey, it ended up being 162 pages. We got out of control. We don't know exactly how we want to put this out. Wanted to see if you were still interested. And he's like, what do I have to do to get this book? And I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And so then Eric and Tim and I kind of emailed back and forth about like, well, what's the best way to do this? And Eric was like, I think we should do 4 issues, all oversized, 40 plus pages per book. And then at the end, we'll put it in a trade. And I was like, yeah, I'm in. And Tim was the same way. He was like, yeah. Let's do it.
I didn't have a problem with that because I'm a big fan of Headlopper, and that's like chunky, and Andrew comes out with that quarterly, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And so it's like if you buy that and you're like, okay, I just sit down and enjoy myself for a little bit here with a big chunky thick piece of comics here. And so I was like, yeah, that's perfect.
Image seems to be on that right now too, like taking that model and like and going with it, like Dragata's book Ghost Cage. just came, and it's going to be 3 oversized issues. And we were talking about Otomo. That's good Otomo vibes right there. So each one of these 4 issues is over 40 pages.
Yeah, right.
And this
40.
was initially just supposed to be 40 pages.
Yes. When I say we epically failed, that's what I mean. Like, it was just supposed to be 40. And Tim and I, every time we meet at Taco Bell, one of us would be like, I added 4 pages. Sorry, dude. I mean, you're like, what? It's like, and I mean, so I didn't feel bad after we got done because Tim, I think, added just as many as I did by the time we got to the end of it.
I was looking at manga, and there's like some, like fast paced. They have more breathing room to like fight scenes. There's have a whole bunch of pages. And so I was looking at that, and I was like, in my mind, I was like, this is a webcomic, so I mean, we don't really have a limit to pages. So I think if I do it this way, it'll be really cool, And then I meet with Doug and be like, Doug, what do you think? I had like 5 extra pages, 4 extra pages, and he's all, well, just as long as there's good page turn and
yeah.
So,
I love those like real long fight scenes where they're the big I'm assuming like big panels with the fights and just that I love the way manga does that, and there's some really good action comics over on this side too that do that so are they mostly like silent with like the
well there's fight scenes like that, but then there's also there's kind of a rhythm to it, like every so often there's a big spread, double page spread pages. That's like a really cool scene. So, it's just kind of rhythmic that way. Whereas, I mean, if it was going to be like a 22-page issue, I think maybe I would have. Maybe one of those spreads would be a splash page instead, or a bigger panel. But I was like, well, this is going to be a web comic, so I'll just do a double page spread here and.
That's where things always seem to get carried away. It's like what Tim would do, like these incredibly, like you guys have already seen a couple of the pages, but like he just go crazy with the detail. And so I'd have a 5-panel page, and somehow each one of those panels turned into a double page spread. I'm just like, trolls fighting dwarves, on this massive scale, and there's a troll the size, of the dime, the tip of a pencil. In the background that Tim drew, and he just went nuts drawing all these things. And I'd be like, when he goes up with that, I can't say no, right? Like he's like, well, I turned your 5-panel, your 1 page into 5. Is that okay? And I'm like, yeah, okay. We'll just roll with it. But that's why it's so large.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. That's cool.
Yeah. So just knowing it was going to be a webcomic, I was like, I can relax a little bit with that type of stuff. So.
The art looks absolutely fantastic, and I'm looking at some of it right now that's available, and it looks absolutely amazing. Now, Tim, I went on your Instagram account, saw a lot of Mars Attacks stuff, and I'm sure you're aware, but I'm a big Mars Attacks fan myself.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And were those some like sketch cards that you had done on that? Man, that is freaking fantastic.
I did.
You got a style. It's like, do you know John Bivens, that artist?
Yeah.
He did like Creature Feature.
Yeah, he's in Minneapolis, dude. Yeah, I've met him.
Oh, dude, I love his artwork. You give me like that kind of vibe. It's a different, obviously it's your own style, but it's like, bro, like I'm seeing Universal Monsters. Like I just opened up this Boris Karloff Frankenstein.
Yes.
How cool is that? You give me that. You're giving me Mars Attacks. You're giving me like this awesome like B movie and A-list horror kind of vibe. And I'm just like excited. Is there a horror influence in the pages of this book? I mean, obviously you're dealing with trolls and some gnarly stuff, right?
There's a little bit. I mean, there's like they go into like a troll cave and stuff, but this was kind of B movies. Ray Harryhausen, like all those Sinbad movies and Jason the Argonauts are like some of my favorite movies because I mean it's just a straight up adventure, like a simple adventure, right?
Yeah. With
big monsters and spectacles that way. So I think that had a lot of influences on this. And I mean I'm a super big fan of Universal Monsters and I have like a million creature from the Black Lagoon figures, and so yes, I'm like B movies are awesome. I love all that stuff. I don't know, it might carry over into this book, the B movie stuff, but it's more of the FX like Clash of the Titans and The Sinbads.
Like the fantasy, the epic fantasy
Yeah.
kind of vibe and all that stuff. But I'm sure there are going to be some of those elements coming in. Is that something you want to explore in a future book? Some of your horror love there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always
Because
down
you'd
for
be
that.
perfect at it, bro. I'm telling you. In fact, right now, if I worked at Marvel, I'd put both of you on a Ghost Rider book, like right now.
Yeah.
Like
That would
right
I could
now.
have fun with that one. Yeah, that would be a blast.
If anybody's listening, I'm telling y'all.
I'd do it.
Throw some Man Thing in there, right?
Tim's already got his reference.
Hell yeah, you do.
Nice.
That's awesome, man.
Mr. Man Thing would be cool. Yeah, I always like creatures and things like that.
Yeah. Doug,
It's funny.
are you into the horror stuff? Because I know
Oh, yeah.
like there's a lot of that in vinyl with the
Yeah.
twins, you know, and plastic, obviously. I mean, those are horror books, man. Like,
Yeah.
is this your kind of vibe, man?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize how much I loved it until I did plastic. But yeah, that I like to, now obviously with my stuff, you can tell I like the dark comedy aspect of it a little bit more. But I love horror films in every shape. And the older ones, I like the more the psychological ones. And I think that's where like you said, I have a couple callbacks to some of that stuff and with the twins and vinyl. And even like we have a scene there that Daniel, the artist of that book, he's the same. And he's like, hey, I'm doing this and I'm stealing it from aliens. I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it.
Nice.
So yeah, I love horror stuff. My favorite to these days though is still they either got to be really campy, like more like what am I thinking? The Babysitter on Netflix. I love that movie.
Okay.
And Dale and Tucker versus Evil. Oh, Dale and Tucker versus Evil. I'll watch it every day if you let me. Like I just love that movie because it's so ridiculous. But some of the newer ones when it gets it's just straight up gore. I'm not as a big a fan of those. I like a little bit more of the psychological, like you don't know what's going on. But that's my personal taste.
I like horror movies like from the 80s. I think there's some really good ones like The Thing,
Mm-hmm.
where there's like an intellectual thing to it, right? Where they don't know who exactly it is. And then another thing from the 80s is they did a lot of really good, like John Carpenter's good at this, but a lot of good of like really good build up and payoffs. And one movie I really love is the 1980s Blob.
Oh yeah.
Have you guys seen that? That movie I think that's like a perfect movie. Like I think RoboCop's a perfect movie, but the Blob from the 1980s, if you watch that, it's perfect because they do a really good job of building things up and paying them off. I don't know if I have an example, but there's a part in, just a quick example, there's a part where the main character is this like biker guy, this outsider. And in the beginning,
he's so ridiculous in that movie. I love him. He's trying to do that jump.
Yeah, in the beginning, he's trying to do the jump and he like wrecks his bike. So he's got to fix his bike, right? And then later on, the payoff is he's getting chased by this thing. And now he's got a girl on the back of his bike. And there's the bridge. He's got to jump it, right?
Yeah.
And so then you're just like, he didn't make it the first time. And so that movie has a lot of little build-ups and payoffs that that's the kind of stuff I really enjoy,
I'm the executive producer, if you want to call that, and the co-host of a show called Dylan's Horror Show I do every week on Saturday nights it's a YouTube channel, Dylan's Horror Show. And we did the Blob like last year. And I was actually not looking forward to it because I love the original one with Steve McQueen. Like I think that it's so cheesy, but it's so awesome at the same time. But man, that 80s one is gnarly. Is that the one that has is that the movie? Because I may be confusing it with something else, but is it the one where they're at like a restaurant and it comes through the sink or something and snatches the dude up, bro?
There's a lot of like really like disturbing things.
They go into the body horror aspect of it, right? And like what it's like to be dissolved by this like blob thing. Like that's some gnarly stuff, man. That's a really good one, man.
It's funny because it's like, sorry, I mean, like Suicide Squad, Starro, pretty ridiculous character, but in this new one, I mean, they really like showed how something like that would be cheesy just could be scary, right? With all those little multiplying. And the blob was the same way. It's like this blob. How could that be scary? Let me show you. You know, dissolves people, eats them alive. And
did you guys get addicted at any point in your life to like the stuff like Toxic Avenger and Humanoids from the Deep?
Yes.
Oh, I love, dude. There was a time in my life where I thought those were the greatest movies ever made. Like
They
I was
are, Doug. They are.
I love those movies.
Humanoids from the Deep is one of those movies where you're just like, I can't believe they fucking made this movie.
I thought that the entire time I was watching. I was like, can they do that? Like you're looking over your shoulder, like, is the FBI going to come arrest me for watching this? Like,
no shit, right?
You can't do that.
I was going to say, when you're talking about the multiplying thing, you know, that in the preview I saw online, you know, you had the little, was it a fairy or a dwarf, which I thought was an excellent use of visual humor there. That was just a perfect scene when you know, it shows it. And it's like, oh, looks so cute, you know, and it's one of them. And then all of a sudden there's hundreds of them. They're like, oh, you know, I mean, that, I don't know, that worked really well.
Yeah.
So
thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe when Tim showed up with that page because I mean, you've seen it, right? I mean, how many hundred folk did he draw? Like, I think he drew at least 100. Like, I was like, holy cow, dude! But yeah, I love that page.
I was like, I hope this reproduces well, because when this shrinks down, those are gonna be really small. But I think I saw it in previews. I was like, it turned out pretty good.
Tim, I want to know a little bit about your process. I see physical pages there behind you, and I see that you're working on a screen there, right? So do you have like a mix of like pen and paper and digital? Do you like draw something, put it in, ink it digitally? How do you work that?
Yeah. So my process is I pretty much pencil it in blue line, pencil it on the Cintiq, right? Then I print that out, tighten it up with pencil a little bit, and ink it, scan it, and then color it in the.
Oh, so you're doing the coloring too.
So I colored about 40, I don't know, like 60 pages of this book. And then we got Michelle Matson, who's freaking awesome. She's a solid colorist. She's done a lot of Mignolaverse stuff.
Okay. Well, that's
Kelly
high
Jones
credentials right there.
Yeah, she did a Kelly Jones Swamp Thing. Is freaking amazing.
Wow.
But
that's cool.
Yeah, so she took over colors and she colored most of the book and she rocked it. So.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So you ink it physically.
Yeah. So
what are you using? Are you using brushes? Or are you using?
I'm using Japanese brush pens, zebra brush pens, like these things. It's like a felt tip brush pen. These are Zebra does these. There's Kiritake. There's the Pentel.
And by the way, really keen-eyed PCPers right now, you're noticing we're seeing the cover to issue number 4 right there. Right there. It's an exclusive, we can say. It's an exclusive.
Hope it's really blurry, so.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I was going to ask because you said you were doing the colors, and I thought there was a colorist on there, but so
yeah.
So do you do like I understand that like they do flats first. Do you do the flatting like when you're doing the colors on that, or
no? We had someone do the flats, and then the pages I did, someone did the flats and then color it, and then same thing with Michelle. They did the flats and then she would color it, and then so like I'd give her some notes and some things to get it just right, but that's kind of how the process would go.
That's cool. So did you all like find her through contacts, or was it like does Image like work with you on those types of things, or get people to help?
Well, Doug found Michelle, right, Doug?
Yeah, that was I was I just finished doing vinyl with Dave Stewart, and so I reached out to Dave, and he said, "Hey, I'd like you to consider Michelle," which happens to be his wife. And I was like, "Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I know Michelle. I didn't realize it was his wife, kind of thing." And so, basically, I threw her what Tim had kind of thrown down, and she's like, "Yeah." She's like, "I haven't done anything like this before, but I want to know how Tim does it." And so that was what was really cool. Is it was like, Tim was doing some really cool stuff, like with textures and stuff that Michelle hadn't used before, and wanted Tim like to walk her through how to do that kind of stuff.
Oh, cool.
And
it was funny. We did.
Okay,
sorry, I don't need to talk over you.
Go ahead, Tim.
On this book, I did all like cell shading. So I did all the cell shading for all the pages, and I include that in the file for Michelle. But her test pages, for some reason, she didn't get the page with the cell shading in it that I did, right? And when we got it back, she mimicked my thing so much that she did the cell shading completely from the beginning. Like I didn't put any, and I was like looking at it, and I was looking at the cell shading I did, and it was so close that I was like, wait a second, I almost couldn't tell that I didn't do it, that she did it. So I was like, yeah, she can do this.
Well, you remember at first, like you called me and you said, "Hey, why is Michelle tweaking my shading?"
Yeah,
and I was like, "I don't know. I'll call and ask her." And I asked her,
because
and
there's
like,
subtle differences.
and she was like, "I didn't get the files with shading in them." And Tim's like, "What?"
Yeah, this looks so close. There's just little teeny things here and there, and so. And she's a master of doing a bunch of styles. If you look her up, you'll see the different books that she's done, and she pretty much knows how to do everything. So I would just show her like these are kind of the pages that I did before, and then she would bring her own colors and it kind of keep the same style.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
It was a big help for Tim too, because Tim's been a classic illustrator for so long, and you bring in Michelle who knows how comic printing works, and I think Tim hadn't had that experience yet of like, well, how do you control ink levels, those kind of things. And Michelle came in and was like, "Hey, you need to touch this up here or there," and like it was great seeing those two, like, because they just became like a team. Tim's like, "Okay, here's what I'm doing. What am I doing? What doesn't work?" And Michelle's like, "Well, this is too much ink on a page. It'll turn into mud. Do this. And it was like fun watching those two like figure that out together. And then they came up with this kind of like the style together. And I love it. I think it's beautiful.
Man, there are plenty of publishers I can say right now that probably need this lesson.
Yes.
My cat is desperately trying to get out of the studio. So Brian, I'm leaving it up to you, brother.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Well,
what I was just going to say, one thing I learned is you look at most comics and you open up the credits and there's more than one person in the credits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's rare individuals that do an entire comic by themselves. And like, that's to be commended, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I learned on this one. I wanted to do everything, but you can't do it. I mean, if you want something done in a timely manner, it's pretty tough. So.
Oh yeah. It's understand, it's hard just to get a monthly book out, on time. That's 20, 22 pages and everything like that. And then, you go back and think, Jack Kirby was doing like 3 books a month, when he was over at DC in his early things, but
yeah.
And they were really tight pencils, but I mean, still was handling it, still had to hand it off, and do all that stuff. So that's great. Yeah. Found her. So, cause I did notice the colors on those preview pages were just gorgeous. I thought they were just really just jumped off the page. So
yeah, just a lucky find on our part. I didn't even know Michelle was looking for work. I don't even know if she was, and at first, it's like, Dave's like, "Oh, try my wife." And you never know how that's actually going to work out. You're like, "Hey, I'm handing you off to somebody who's sitting next to me." And I'm like, "Oh my God, what if this doesn't work out?" But Michelle's absolutely fantastic. Like she was a true pleasure to work with. Like recommend her for anything, any day.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's awesome that she was excited to do it. So whether she had, whether she was looking forward or not, she jumped in because she loved it. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. That's great.
Well, yeah. And the other thing too, that's funny is, she's Scandinavian too.
Oh,
her parents are from Denmark.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She's so.
Yeah, her and Tim every now and then would send emails in like whatever language they were using secret. I'm pretty sure they were talking about me.
Yep.
But
yeah,
but they're saying stuff to each other in whatever language they're speaking, and I'm like, thanks, guys.
Yep. Yeah. You don't want to Google Translate that in case they are talking about you.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, like this is all Doug's fault.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Well,
That was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I know you guys mentioned you'd have these long sessions at Taco Bell, and I was wondering if so did the staff ever come up and say, "Hey, you guys need anything?" Because I don't know.
Oh yeah.
My perspective is that everyone there was like, "How's it going, Doug?" They're like best friends with Doug. Doug's like, it's one of those guys that like if you go somewhere with him, so many strangers are gonna come up and be like, "Hey, Doug, how's it going? How's this going?" And you're like, "You know those people?"
Taco Bell was like, what? It's not even like a half a mile from my house. So, I mean, I won't lie. I eat there all the time. And I'm just one of those people. Like, I mean, I've been in retail. I've worked food. I know how all that stuff works. So, like, I go in there and I try to treat everybody really well. Kind of ask them how they're doing. Just be nice. Try to take care of people. And so yeah, like Tim said, I mean, when we were in there, they were always checking on us. Hey, you guys need anything else? Because I mean, there was time. What, Tim? We were in there 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
And we spent like $4.
The new 52 was announced, and we had to talk about that for a while.
Oh yeah,
one time.
Heck yeah.
I can imagine like a new 52 like powwow session at Taco Bell. And by the way, I love Taco Bell. What's your go-to at Taco Bell? Your go-to item? Tim, Doug?
Oh, I would just get like a bean burrito, or I started getting what Doug was getting. He would get like a bean burrito and a chicken quesadilla or something.
Yep, bean burrito and chicken quesadilla was my thing for a long time.
That's nice.
And now it's a chicken quesadilla, and there for a while they had like the fried chicken tacos.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
the ones where you talking about the ones where like the shell is like chicken?
No. It actually had fried chicken on the inside.
Okay.
I was scared of those.
Those, dude, I'm telling you, those were good. Whatever sauce they put in that shit was awesome. Yeah. Who needs a shell? Who needs a corn flour shell? I love Taco Bell. I like bean burrito is a go-to. I used to love the spicy tostada. They took that off the menu. It ruined me. It wrecked me. I was like, that's a clean $1, 200 calories. Like, come on. It was easy to handle and track and understand. I really am excited about the return of the Mexican pizza, though. I'll tell you that. I am very excited because Taco Bell has always been there for me. And then going through the year of the pandemic, they decided to take away half their menu that I love. And it wrecked me.
Yeah.
But,
Well, when they bring that Mexican pizza back, then we can go and you can buy me that Taco Bell lunch you owe me.
I do owe you a Taco Bell lunch because of that Seahawks Cowboys bet we made like 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I don't remember how long ago it was. It was a while.
Yeah, it was not this last season. I think it was the season that the Cowboys absolutely sucked. So I think that was the 2020 season. Anyway, We're veering away from sports real quick. Doug, you were in our neck of the woods. You went to high school, I believe, with like our hometown comic book hero, Cully Hamner.
Yep, Brewer High School.
You're from you spent some time down here in North Alabama, man.
Oh yeah, several years. I mean, I loved it. I loved Huntsville. My mom got a divorce right after I got out of high school, and we moved back to Florida for a couple of years. And all I did was like do everything I could to get back to Huntsville. So that's when I moved back to Huntsville, went up on Golf Road, moved in with my best friend from high school, and just like, loved it.
That's awesome, man. Did you guys ever run into Terry Moore or anything like that? Because I think he's from around this area too, right?
I didn't. Yeah, I never had the pleasure.
I know that Cully used to go to the Tattooed Lady all the time. You used to go up there?
Oh yeah.
Comics?
Yep.
Yeah.
Eric's at your store now, right? Doesn't he come buy books at your store?
Yes, he does. Yeah, he does. And I used to buy comics from him, so it's like the circle of life.
Yep.
I was like, that's what Elton John was talking about.
Yeah. Recently, I found out that my in-laws they moved off of it's like north of Madison, but they bought the house that Lydia, the owner, original owner, they bought one of the house previous to that, where they used to own that house. It was like I was like, wow, holy crap, yeah, because I spent lots and lots of hours over at Tattooed Lady, man.
Yeah.
It was a great place.
That was the first comic book. I didn't even know they existed. Up until that point, I thought I was doing the standard. I went to the grocery store every week to see if I could get the next issue of whatever was, desperate to make sure I didn't miss an issue. And my mom came home one day and went, I drove by a comic book store. And I'm like, that's not a thing, Mom.
You just made something up.
Yeah. Like no. So back in, this is the old days, right? So I had to pull out the phone book. And I was like, oh my God. And so the very next day, I woke up and went straight to the comic book store, and there was a tattooed lady for the first time. And I was like, and of course I was in heaven. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know these existed. And they're like, would you like to get a pull list? And I'm like, what's a pull list? And they're like, we save every issue for you. I'm like, oh my God.
This exists.
Yeah, but speaking of that, like, because a lot of the younger people, used to growing up with comic shops and pull lists and stuff like that. That was a revelation when you could get a pull list, because, like you were saying, you'd go to the grocery store. Grocery stores didn't, like, it wasn't a priority for them to get every issue of everything that came out, right? I mean, they would just they'd get a shipment in, throw them up there, and so you could potentially miss issues.
Yeah, I think Ed Piscor says the only thing you could count on was Batman and X-Men.
Yeah. There was clearly some staples, but
maybe there's a reason why so many people our age are Batman and X-Men fans. I don't know. Could have also something to do with the characters, because they stand the test of time. Well, but Batman's like Shakespeare. You can do Batman in any setting, in any situation, and it's gonna work. And I wish we could get Superman to that point. So I don't know. That's just a personal idea. But if anybody, y'all out there are not from this area, Tattooed Lady was like, that was a big staple. That and Jennings were like the places that you would go to outside of like your food world, or your Bruno's, or your gas station, or anything like that, and get comics. And when I first started buying comics, of course, they were sent to me by my dad, who was in the Navy, my stepdad. And then I would go to these gas stations, these grocery stores, right? And you would miss issues, right? And it was frustrating when you first realize you can go into a place and tell them, hey, I want this book, this book, this book, and this book, and you will have it. It's like world widening. Like, it's just, there's a gaping hole that's been there, y'all, that you've never realized. Now it's filled. And then when you give that to like say an 8, 9, 10-year-old, that's a bad thing, because our eyes like I want I remember my stepdad had a talk with me. He was like, we can't keep doing, because every week I'd put more. I would be like, can we put this in there? Can we hold this? Right. And like, now being a guy that runs a comic shop, I'm like, yeah, we'll hold it, but we can't hold it forever. Like, come on, man, you guys got to work with me here. But I used to be that kid that would be like, oh, I want this, this, and this. But then you learn you got to streamline, and we learned that early. For me, it was always Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Superman, Batman. And then during Maximum Carnage and the Mark Bagley days, it was Spider-Man. What was your go-to, Doug? What was the one that you couldn't miss?
Uncanny. I mean, you were making fun of it earlier, being everywhere, but like,
it's true though. I mean, because it works.
Yeah. Uncanny, honestly, like when I discovered Uncanny was back during that, Wolverine in the sewers in the Hellfire Club, right? I think that's like 133, somewhere around there. I was in a bad spot, and that comic kind of in a lot of ways saved my life. And so I just became addicted to this, like, here's a group of characters that I can identify with, and I loved them. And that was my thing. To this day, I'm still an Uncanny X-Men fan, even though I can't keep up with the 14 books that come out now. But like that was my go-to. And then when I got older, I mean, you hit Dark Knight Returns. That was like a mind-blowing kind of like thing. And then Daredevil for a while was my thing.
Hell yeah! Out of all the Uncanny X-Men stuff, what's your favorite outside of Claremont?
Oh, outside of Claremont? Wow.
Because that's the easy answer. I'm not going to give you the easy one, Doug. Come on. We're an hour in, man. Come on.
Yeah. The Larry Stroman X Factor.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I love Larry Stroman's work. And it was just, you had, was he called Big Guy back then?
Strong Guy.
Strong Guy. I just love that team that they put together. And it was kind of comical, but yet they could kick some ass. And like, I was like, yeah, I just loved them.
That's awesome. What about you, Tim? What's the one go-to?
The one go-to? When I found out about Holdless, I really had to think of who I was going to put in there, because at the time it was like Image was starting, and this was like I was into like Youngblood and Wildcats and all the Image stuff, but I knew that I couldn't get them all. But one of the
probably could have. So little came out on time. You probably could have got them all.
You probably could have. Yeah.
Yep. When I was in the fourth grade, this kid brought Eric Larson's Revenge of the Sinister Six. He had 4 of those issues, and that day he brought me, he's like, oh, check these out. And I was like blown away because Spider-Man had this like, it was like a cybernetic Spider-Man. And it was just like, what, wait, you can do that to him? Like, and so it was just like opened a thing of creativity for me there. So I had to get those issues. But the funny thing is we were looking at him and the teacher came over and took him away and he lost him for the whole year. Right. He was pissed at me. He was like, heck, man. But later I found those at Fred Meyer. But so Eric Larson was the first artist that I could see a comic and be like, that's Eric Larson without, looking at the credits or anything. And because of that, I mean, for some reason, I was just really drawn to his art. And so it was Savage Dragon,
Nice.
which now looking back on it, I mean, my opinion is that's the best written out of all of it. Early Image.
I've been covering these early Image books, right, on Image in the 90s on Rockin' Robbie Live. And I did Savage Dragon. The first time I read the miniseries, because I didn't grow up an Eric Larson fan, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I said. I was like, this is the best written out of all of these. Like, this is a really good, complete story with structure and art.
Without Eric Larson, you don't have Robert Kirkman, because Robert Kirkman's writing style is very much inspired by Eric Larson's early Savage Dragon, because he was really good at the cliffhanger. He was really good at having little subplots here and there.
Yeah. And
that just really like got me connected. Like every month I read the issue and I'd be waiting a whole month for the next one. Right. And luckily he came out. I mean, he was one of the guys that came out.
He's the one still trying to do Image United, man.
But anyways, I really got accustomed to, I really got the feel of what it was like to get a comic, have a cliffhanger, and being like, oh, what's going to happen? And being able to think about that, read that comic, I don't know, like 6 or 7 times through the whole month, and then finally get the new one the next month and be like, yes, what happens? And then you get another cliffhanger, right? And so that was just a lot of fun. I mean,
and for that age, that story content, man, like, wow.
And he'd kill bad guys. I mean, you see this badass bad guy, you're like, this guy's amazing, and they'd get killed. You're like, what? And then also, I mean, I was 10, 11, and I mean, there's some risque stuff in there, right? Mm-hmm. And I lived in Park City, which is up a mountain, and the comic shop was in Salt Lake. And so my mom worked in Salt Lake. She would go to the comic shop and get my pull, buy it for me, and bring it, right? So sometimes she would give them to me and I'd like read it and I'd be like, I hope my mom didn't see this, right? Yeah. And there's one specifically, there's an issue where there was a shower scene or something. No, it was Savage Dragon got his hand blown off, right? And the reveal was that his hand was growing back. But the reveal page was like a splash page of him, and Rapture was like splayed on top of him, naked, and the shadows or everything, right? I was with my mom. We went to the comic shop. I was sitting in the passenger seat reading that, right? And I turned the page and there's that, and my mom's right there. And I'm like shielded it. And I was like, I'm just gonna put this back in the.
That's when you do this number.
Yeah. I'm just going to put this back in the sleeve and we'll read this later because I need my next Savage Dragon next month, right? So, I mean, that was it.
That's
it
awesome.
was fun. It's fun.
When I read that miniseries, it turned me into a fan, bruh. Like, so I was like, you know what? Savage Dragon is so deep in right now, and it's hard to find some of those issues, right? Because he's maintained this following. Like, I applaud him so much because I first started thinking about it. I was like, I love all of the Image founders. They all kind of found their vein. They found their niche. They found what they wanted to do, and they did it, right? And they're still doing it. Like Jim Lee is doing his thing. Liefeld's doing his thing. Todd's doing his thing. Mark's doing his thing. And Eric was the one who's like, I just want to write and draw a comic. Yeah. That's all I want to do. And he's still doing it, man. Yeah. And I love it. So I got into Ant, and I'm loving the energy of that stuff. But that I'm starting to buy and piece together like the early Savage Dragon ongoing now. and I'm ready to like dive into like the first 20, 30 issues or so, man.
The thing that was fun was I left comics for a little bit. Like I played college football, and during college kind of got sucked into a different world, right? And so I came back to it, and right about that time, Invincible was starting up, and I started Invincible on issue 8, right?
Oh, nice.
And reading that, I was like, this seems similar to Savage Dragon, like the structure, the storytelling, the cliffhangers, right? And I was like, this is it. We're back. This is the stuff again. And then I got all the Invincible, and it was Ryan Otley lived in Utah, right? And that's where I was from. So it was another bonus, like, oh wow, this is kind of a local thing. So
the dude's killing it on Hulk right now, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Killing it. Oh my goodness. There have been moments where I was like not sure if I wanted to stick through the Hulk book, but then I can't deny the power of the Otley, man. I can't do it. That shit's so freaking good, man. It's perfect for what he wants to do. And that may be a situation where Donnie's like, what do you want to draw, bro? And he's like, Hulk with the jetpack and the Weapon X helmet. Like, I always thought that was cool. I like Barry Windsor Smith.
I was surprised. Otley's he loves blood, man. He's a bloody guy, right? I was surprised in some of these issues, like, whoa, dude, this Marvel comic is bloody.
Yeah, it's got Donnie's name on it. They'll be like, okay, we'll be like a little bit lenient with this one because it's Brian and Donnie. That book's kind of gnarly. I guess a lot of it's like, it's in the psyche, so it's not real. Yeah. So like, go to town, dude. Kill a 100-foot tall Wolverine. Do it. Like, make it splatter. Make it awesome. Let's get into that. I think that's good, man. I like that. What you got, Brian?
Well, typical question we ask is, if you had what's your dream Big Two character? If you had your pick, what would you pick? We
always try to beat the chat in on that one because they always.
What do you think, Doug? What's yours? Do you have one?
I mean, for me, it's always going to be Uncanny X-Men. Like that. If I have a bucket list, kind of like I don't think that'll ever happen. But if I had a bucket list, like I would want to write an X-Men story.
What would be your team? Unless you don't want to reveal it.
Cool.
So I was going to ask.
But I have. There's an idea in my head already, and it starts with Warpath. Thunderbird's younger brother, and he's figured out that heroes are being taken over by an alien kind of race kind of thing. Maybe it's the Brood, maybe it's the Phalanx, maybe it's a cross, right? And so he has to go find the X-Men who aren't infected. And of course, I'm going to find, and for me, the classic Uncannies are going to be ones I want to play with if they'd let me. So, I want Nightcrawler, I want Colossus, I want, and who doesn't want to write Wolverine, right? So like, of course you have to throw Wolverine in there, but like, that would be my base right there. I've always loved Kitty Pryde too. I don't think they've done what I think they can with her yet, because she can be such a badass character, but it seems like they kind of like always kind of have a leash on her, like keeping her under control. But I don't want like the big ones. I don't want like Magneto and Professor X and Phoenix and those kind of characters. I want like the characters that you want to take into a bar with you in a bar fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that fits your style too, man. I like that, man.
Yeah.
I just read for the Marvel in the 80s bit, for the first time I read the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine miniseries that Chris Claremont did with Al Milgrom, and holy freaking cow. And that's the moment I thought it when I was reading comics, and in the 90s when I was getting into like Shadowcat was showing up, I thought that was the first time they were trying to make her badass. Right? No, it starts like there, like that's the evolution. And then I've done 2 panels with Chris, and super cool guy, and he loves these characters, and he talks about these crazy ass stories and these like arcs and where the characters should be right now according to his plan. And to him, like Shadowcat was going to be the next Wolverine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's really cool. I mean, she's a really cool character, but I never appreciated the work and the arc that Claremont was trying to do with her until I read that book in particular. And Al Milgrom, I always thought of him as an inker. Like that's on me. Like his work on that is so amazing. Holy cow.
That's a great series.
It's Miller-esque, man. It's like so freaking good, man. It's like that Miller Rubenstein shit, man. It's really good.
Tim, what's your dream?
Oh, gee, Big Two.
Yep.
I don't know. It's hard. I love Batman. I'm more of a Marvel guy, but Batman is probably one of my favorite characters. But I don't know. That's pretty tough. I mean, I would like to do kind of like a D-list type character, that's really really quirky. That's not like a everyday hero, like a Man Thing or
D-Man.
or like Swamp Thing or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I would love to do a Rocketeer comic. I would love to do a Mars Attacks comic. So things like that.
Dynamite's Mars Attacks. I think they do. I'm going to give Nick Barucci a call. Just wait.
I have a couple ideas for a Mars Attacks.
I know.
Situation.
I got Nick's number. I'm going to give him a call. I'm going to be like, hey, man, you got a Mars Attacks comic coming anytime soon?
The thing is I drew a ton of these Mars Attacks sketch cards for this latest series, and I actually had some cards in the main series. But after drawing those guys a bunch of times, you kind of get a feel for how do you kind of redesign them, or what your style would be. So I kind of have that figured out. But I mean, I've got a family. I'm trying to make money for them, So I mean, I don't know what the licensing is tied up in that stuff, and that all that stuff plays a factor. But so no, Big Two kind of seems like it's been explored.
I know. At the same time, you said Swamp Thing, and you said, I think that's a good fit, bro. And I also think Ghost Rider would be really good for both of y'all to work together on.
That would be cool.
It. Yeah, cool. If I was working with Tim, I mean, honestly, I would tackle anything if I was working with Tim. Like it's that good of a collaboration. When you work with somebody and it clicks, like you're like, yeah, we could take on anything, and we can make it work.
Yeah. How about Rainbow Bright? Let's get that going.
Oh yeah, it's going to be Doug's version.
I want to see that, man.
Vinyl meets Rainbow Bright.
Let's talk about that, man. I just read Plastic and Vinyl completely last night. Had a nice comic book double feature. A great double feature to put those two together, because they both kind of explore these like mentally disturbed serial killers. And when they were first coming out, like Plastic was coming out, and I was like, okay, I get it. It's a guy who's like in love, has a relationship with a plastic doll, right? You think, so it seems like it's a simple idea. And then Vinyl, when you get into it, which I love it. By the way, I think Walter's one of my favorite characters I've read in a comic book in a while.
Oh, thanks,
Walter's amazing. So when you get that, what I was noticing last night when I read them was Plastic and Vinyl both represent like an aesthetic, like a feel, right? Like I started realizing that the dude in Plastic, it's not necessarily like, he's off his rocker. You know what I'm saying? But like, he's got some kind of like a thing about feeling plastic, because I didn't notice until I reread it last night. He's killing everybody with plastic stuff, and that's all he wants to touch. And Walter just loves that sensation of listening to vinyl. And I love that you're using that in the titles. And I guess I just want you to kind of speak on these two books that I think are phenomenal, and anybody needs to check it out. I think we're very close to the trade paperback release of Vinyl.
Yep, 420. Yep.
Oh, bruh. Perfect. Y'all blaze a bowl and read some Vinyl. It's going to blow your mind, man, because that book never goes in the direction that I thought it was going to go in. And I love it. I love that you're utilizing music into that, because you're just making it like an extra sensory type thing by just all the plastic stuff, the listening experience, the Vinyl. Like, it's more than just reading it. It's like more tactile than just the page on my hands. I just want you to talk about that. And why are you obsessed with crazy ass serial killers, man? What's going on here?
I mean, it's fun that, like, well, Plastic, when I first came up with that and I pitched it to Daniel and he fell in love with it, we had a lot of people telling us not to do that book, that it was going to ruin our careers.
Oh, wow. I can imagine that. Right?
Yeah. I mean, the blow up doll throws people for a loop. And so, we just dove into it deep, and I really wanted, like, not only was he in love with a woman made of plastic, he was obsessed with everything plastic, even though he wouldn't put it in those terms, right? I mean, it's just his natural inclination to pick up a spork. He loves sporks, those kind of things. And then, it's a little plastic naked army ladies and those kind of things. So, that was the focus there, is just like, I want him to be obsessed, but not like talk about it, just show it. And in vinyl, obviously we use it a little bit with, Walter has dementia, and doing the research on what they're doing to treat dementia, music is one of the big things. They found out people actually can remember things when they're hearing music better than not. And so then it was like, we wanted to do this Material trilogy. And when we came up with vinyl, I was like, but I don't want it to be the Material vinyl. I want to change it a little bit. And so that's where we came up with the records and stuff. And then he's obsessed, with, kind of listening to records. And yeah, I mean, with plastic, when we got Laura Martin on there, she came up with kind of the color style of like this gritty kind of like every page feels a little dirty. And so, we were kind of like, okay, so this is kind of like our dirty serial killer love story. And then when we got Dave Stewart for vinyl, we wanted it to be beautiful horror is what we called it. We wanted it to be almost Disney-esque.
Yeah,
but
it is
like crazy serial killer gore fest, And so, I mean, it's just, and why I'm obsessed with it, I can't, it's one of those things like, I hit on plastic. I didn't have any plans on doing anything other than plastic with serial killers. And Daniel and I fell in love with the process of doing that character. And then when Eric Stevenson came to us and said, hey, do you have anything else in this line? We were like, well, yeah, we can come up with something. And when we came up with like, kind of like my whole thought behind vinyl was a Justice League of serial killers. And so, it's like, okay, let's do this. Let's have fun with this. And so then I just got addicted. Like, I love this idea of like normal looking people that are serial killers and like, but I want them all to have their special, almost like a power, right? Like each one of them does it differently.
Yeah.
They all have their own obsessions. And so then it just became fun of like, okay, well, what do the twins do? Like, I want them to be like this, these two characters, they're almost annoying because they're nonstop talking, but they're obsessed with horror films. I'm like, yes, I love that. And you got Rennie, who's in fashion school, but yet she makes her clothes out of people's skin. And you're like, yes,
yeah,
keep going. Those kind of things. So I mean,
like Leatherface follows her Instagram account.
Yes, exactly. And it was just a lot of fun of like, trying to figure out how to make all that work. I mean, it was just, it's one of those things, just like Beware the Eye of Odin. Like, I'm working with Daniel, who's incredible to work with, just like Tim is. And when you find those people, it just starts clicking and it makes it easier. 40-page comics turn into 162-page comics. Yeah. Because you're loving what you're doing.
That's awesome. I love you were mentioning how like in vinyl, everything is so bright. It really is. And I had just watched Midsummer for the first time ever, like last week for Dylan's horror show. And I was obsessed with this idea after a conversation I had with Joe Corallo about horror in daylight. And we were trying to piece together, like, there's not a lot of like, there's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? There's the first half of Halloween. Right. But then there's Midsummer. Midsummer does that so well. It doesn't utilize shadows and darkness. And I love that in vinyl because even when they're indoors, it's right there for you. And it does not hesitate or shy away from any of the gore. Y'all, vinyl is glorious. That's what else.
Nice. I was glad you mentioned the Justice League of serial killers because like that was one of the aspects of that story that I love so much. Actually, was that you're introduced to him, and all this, and then all of a sudden there's all these people bringing in doing stuff, and you're just, oh man, that was a blast to read. So, and I notice you like to use a lot of humor in that. Is that something that's you're always trying to work in as part of your works?
Oh yeah, especially we're calling it the plastic verse now, but like we did mix in quite a bit of stuff with plastic, as far as the humor aspect of it. It's a little, admittedly dark humor, but in vinyl we wanted to kind of keep up like the humor aspect of it because I like that aspect of like we're hopefully gonna make you laugh, and then when you turn the page you're gonna see the bloodiest scene you've ever seen. And like those mix of emotions I think is what we're always aiming for, is like we want to kind of catch you off guard and go, listen, we want you to laugh here, and then when you turn the page be disgusted. Yep. And what does that do to your brain? Like and for Daniel and I, we love that kind of stuff, so we need to kind of lean into it.
Yeah, that's great because it definitely works.
Oh, thanks.
So you allude to the plastic verse, and you mentioned Material trilogy. So I guess there's a third book coming.
There is a third book. Yep. Obviously we can't talk much about it, but it is. I found out this week that it's most likely coming out in November.
I cannot wait for Rubber to release from Image Comics in November.
Wood.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's something definitely to look forward to. But in between, Beware the Eye of Odin. It sounds super freaking awesome. Who's the letterer on this book? Because I was watching you, Doug, earlier today. You were on a show, I think it was from last year. It was pre-vinyl because you were like, I got something, but I can't talk about it yet. I don't remember the dude's name, but you were talking about like just basically putting together a comic book, having to commit, like, you know what, it's going to be $20K. Let's do it on our own. Where do you want to go with it? Write what you want to write. And you have some really cool process and inspirational type stuff in that show. So if I could remember the show, maybe I'll link it in the PCP Army for everybody. But you mentioned the importance of lettering, which is something we talk about on this channel. And it is important because you said, and man, I've never heard anybody on YouTube say this before, but you said when you read a comic that's self-published and it's got bad lettering, and you jump out of it and you're done. Right. Mm-hmm. And I 100%, I've read published books like that. And I'm like, you got to have good lettering. What is that importance, man? And when did you first realize that?
The fun thing about that one is I realized it because I lettered the first couple of issues of The Ride. And when it come into print and I'd see it and I'd go, oh, I screwed that up. And I'm reading it, my writing, and going, oh, that pulled me out of the story because that didn't work what I was trying to do as a letterer. And I went, I got to find a letterer that's good, that knows what they're doing so that people don't notice this kind of stuff. And started working with Ed Dukeshire. And again, just like there's a theme here. I keep working with the same people because once you find somebody that you click with, you don't have to do a whole lot of extra legwork to try to make something good. And
Ed did vinyl, right?
Oh yeah, Ed did plastic. He did vinyl. He's doing Beware the Eye of Odin as well. Because Ed just gets it and he understands me. And a lot of times I don't have to go into detail about like, hey, I want this balloon over here. This blah 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 blah. I'm like, hey, make sure the trolls speak differently than humans. Like we need a different font, but it doesn't need to be so different that people notice. And so like that, he would come back and be like, hey, what if we do this kind of balloon? And you're like, yes, that's perfect. And people are going to notice it, but you're going to go, oh, that's troll speak. Oh, that's a hundredfold speak, those kind of things. And so I'd say this to a lot of people because a lot of times I'll run into people who are self-publishing and they're like, they'll show me their book and it's clear that they didn't pay anybody to letter it. They did it themselves or they paid somebody that they shouldn't have. And I'll ask them, I'll be like, how important is this for this to be successful for you? And they're like, well, I mean, this is everything. Because I mean, obviously what we're doing, you care about it. I'm like, then spend $20 on a good letterer because it'll make all the difference in the world. If you won't spend $20 a page on lettering, you're not serious enough. Because come on, guys, that's what, I mean, even for our 40-page one, that's $880 for 40 pages.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned on that show is like that you were like, oh, we worked with the artist and we got a deal on the coloring, but we didn't break a deal with the letterer because the letterers are like some of the most underpaid people in the industry. So
yeah, totally
so
agree with that.
It's not a huge investment, right?
No, and you get fantastic work. I mean, Ed, and I've said 20 because he started out when we first met. He was at 10, and now I pay him 20. And he asked a couple. I think it was last year. He's like, "Hey, I've been getting 15 for a couple of years." I'm like, "Oh my God, you're right. Let's bump you up to 20." Like
He's doing a book I love. Is it Once in Future? Is he doing Once in Future right now? There's something he's doing that I just absolutely
doing so much.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, there's so many great letterers out there. I talk about it. I mean, there's him. There's Jim Campbell. There's Aditya Bidikar. There's Hassan Otsman El Hal. What?
Hassan.
Yeah. I wasn't gonna go without mentioning him, Brian. Yeah. Tim, when you first of all, okay, so Tim, when you're doing your pages, are you taking into account the lettering? Do you have a full script that you're getting from Doug? Is that how y'all are working, or is it plot? Or okay?
Yeah, he gave me a full script. So then, my process is, I mean, I just rough a balloon in there, and then crappily write in there with my sloppy handwriting, just to give me a basis of this will at least fit my handwriting in there. And it's usually more room than Ed will need, right? And that was something, I mean, this was my first comic, so I was kind of learning, right? So that's something I kind of worked out through the course of this. I mean, I don't know if Doug noticed, if it shows or anything, but I found out that if I just rough the balloon in there and put the lettering in, that at least, then I can, if the letter is like, well, there's no room for the letters here, I can at least have a reference. Well, I was intending it to be in this area, right? Yeah. So
that's nice. So does Ed have access to your roughs with the balloon, or okay?
Yep, we made sure Ed had access to that because I mean, Tim. It was wonderful. And the other thing working with Tim was like when he started doing the balloon stuff, I was like, oh yeah, Tim's thinking this through, and I'm going to use these guides to at least show Ed. Now, obviously when you go in and do the polishing of dialogue, things change, but you can still get the aesthetic of what Tim had in his head of how the composition was going to work. So we can still kind of follow that, so we're not breaking any of his like, hey, this is where I wanted the eyes to flow on this page. And so I make sure Ed gets all those. So go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, as well. Like if you look at Mike Mignola's, I mean, I guarantee you he communicates with the letterer because his balloons are put in a space where it literally guides your eye through the page, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it's a part of that composition, right? Like it's so intentional. Yeah.
I wasn't trying to be that literal, but I was like, I mean, I was feeling a little bit weak in some areas. Like I want them to go to this panel, and so maybe if I overlap a bubble here, that will help, right? I don't know if Ed took that, and ran with it, but it's definitely something to consider, as a letterer. Is that's where your eyes are going to go,
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize sometimes that, like, there are plenty of books. There have been Bendis books in the past I adore. Powers, for instance, with Oming's artwork. I love Powers.
Yeah.
I love it. And I'll let people borrow it, and they're like, I don't know how to read this. And I'm like, well, it's actually well done. Like, I think Bendis and those in that time really understood that, right? But it is sometimes we don't realize the barrier to entry to people that have never read a comic. You know what I'm saying? And there are certain things you got to do, like just like you got to guide the eye in your line work, you got to guide that eye with the lettering, and Doug's got to think about that when he's writing his script out, right? You got, you're not like Stan Lee. You're not just filling in every empty space.
With as many words as I can get on there.
Yeah, that's cool. Brian, you got any thoughts or questions about that process or anything else, man?
No, I don't have anything to add to that. I do appreciate that though, because like I know it can be difficult sometimes for the artists. Like, sometimes they switch the, you got to have, the first character speaking should be on the left panel, side of the panel and stuff like that. So it's I'm sure that's all part of the learning of getting the craft in. So
you got to learn it and get into it.
That's
you don't want to be like the guy. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting Tim. God, I'm sorry. I was just saying, you don't want to be like the guy who did Boondock Saints, and people are like, you shouldn't frame the shot this way, and you're like, screw you. I'm going to be a huge.
I think that balloon placement thing, where the character who's talking first in the script is something that is easily missed by artists.
Yeah,
you could be. It's not something people talk about, and it's something that you kind of got to learn about by drawing a comic page and working with the script and being like, oh, wait a second. I got to have these guys set up. And the thing is too, that's a little bit tricky, is the 180 rule, where you can't just be like flipping angles, to wherever who's talking first. I'll just flip it around. You can't confuse people. And so it's definitely something you need to know, because if you don't know about it, it's going to really screw things up.
Yeah, if you find out at the lettering stage, that's not good, right?
That 180 rule is one of the things I think the guy from Boondock Saints didn't want to adhere to, by the way. And you can see it in the film, but anyway, that's weird. By the way, he's coming. Apparently, he wants to do a Boondock Saints 3. So I'm like, whatever. I like Boondock Saints, by the way. I just want to let everybody know that I like Boondock Saints. It's okay. I had something. I forgot it, Brian. So. We were talking about we were talking about lettering and all that kind of stuff, right? Blah blah blah. The 180 rule. I don't know. So I'm just gonna go to this next bit. Tim? What are your artistic influences? Comic book art wise, who influenced you?
Oh, geez. Eric Larson. I don't know if it shows, but Eric Larson, big time, like storytelling, like panel layout and stuff. Ryan Otley, really. Early Invincible, his storytelling is really foolproof, I think, and his panel choices and angles and all that stuff. Really, there's a lot of influences.
He's looking at his bookshelf.
Yeah, I'm looking at my bookshelf here. I mean, there's so many awesome artists, really.
Yeah. No, I mean, Eric Larson, obviously, you were talking about the Savage Dragon influence. Ryan, someone obviously that you've seen and looked up to and seen his work. So those are some really cool stuff, man.
And all those guys kind of around. I mean, like Jason Howard, you know that guy?
Oh, yeah.
He did
Cemetery Beach and yeah.
He definitely has the Eric Larson storytelling sequence. You know what I mean? The panels, the big panels,
and the energy too. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's coming from doing a Kirkman script, but I don't think it is. I think it's just being there in the 90s and seeing 90 comic storytelling. I know there's a stigma there that's like there's not really storytelling, but I do think there are guys that have that down, like, you know, like Eric Larson, and there are valuable things to pull from those guys. So
yeah, storytelling is very important. You know, we had that stuff in the Image boom where, you know, and in that, you know, late 80s, early 90s boom of just comics in general, you had this idea of like the splash page and the anchor on the page and on all that kind of stuff. And it's awesome to see and it's great, but you got to be one of the greats, you got to tell a story. You know, Will Eisner is not one of the greats because every time you saw, he drew like the spirit on half a page on every other page. You know what I'm saying? Like he's telling stories. Frank Miller was somebody who was able to take an influence from like manga and bring that in and do like, I mean, the Image guys learned so much from Frank Miller, but he also incorporated hardcore storytelling. And you may argue that certain Image founders lack in certain storytelling abilities. Eric Larson is the exception to that rule, but that's standard. And like people all the time, and what you like in art style wise, that's all subjective. It's all based on your preference, your aesthetic. No one's ever right when you're critically thinking about something, usually about what you like and what you don't, right? But so many people ask me, why do you like John Romita Jr.? The first thing I say is because he can tell a damn story. Yeah. He can tell a story visually, and that's so important. And I think the first thing about comic book art in particular that you really got to kind of think about as any kind of creator, you got to tell the story with what you're working with, what you're doing.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of influences. So
it's hard to argue against any of those founders, though, right? I mean, you know, we can talk about all the people that hate Rob Liefeld. To this day, if Rob Liefeld puts his hand on a book from Marvel or DC, it sells an extra 15 to 20,000 copies every month.
Right. He literally just reprinted. They're reprinting a graphic novel he did like 5 years ago. They're putting it out as a 4-issue miniseries. It sells well. I bought it. I love Rob Liefeld. I think Rob Liefeld's got an energy in his artwork that people don't appreciate these days because they like to focus on little things. I'm like, that's ridiculous, man. Go back and look at his Shadowhawk #0. You could tell it was done the first time he read Sin City. He did Shadowhawk #0.
That was his version.
But it works, man. It's so cool, man.
I wish there was more of that. I mean, I love Rob Liefeld, and I mean, the thing is, you got to pull the good things from it, you know, that you can take and run with it. I think he's the guy that turns the dial all the way up to 11 and has it there the whole time, you know. And it's just like boom. And you think of all the movies that were big, like Terminator and like Rambo and all that. He took all the juice from that and put it in his comics, right? But what you can take away from that is like if you have a crazy loud heavy metal song that's just up the whole time, it's not going to be as interesting as something that goes down and up, you know, with a rhythm, right? Yeah. And so if you can like figure out how to take a giant Rob Liefeld panel and put it in, if there's a talking scene and there's like a build up or something, you have these little panels that build up to the giant, like in your face thing. I mean, you could use that as a tool. Yeah. So seeing the founders and seeing like what they did, you can take things from it and be like, oh, well, this is what happens if you turn it up to 11 for a full issue or a full story, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that is a thing I love about Rob Liefeld. You know, you can learn that, like, okay, this is how you keep it turned up. And I love that Rob is always turned up. It could be people could be whispering to each other. They'll be like, and I fucking love that. And McFarlane, like his layouts, there's certain things about his design, his all he has to do is draw capes for 20 pages. I'll buy it every single freaking week. Jim Lee, absolutely. Mark Silvestri. Like, I mean, they're all amazing, and they all have their own thing that they do artistically, and it works. And they've all brought this. What are some of your influences? Obviously, Doug, Chris Claremont's got to be a big one.
Oh yeah, Chris Claremont. I'd put him in the top 5 of all the writers in every field that had an influence on me. Frank Miller. You got to throw him in there, whether people like him now or not. But he just wrote so much good stuff. Daredevil, Sin City. Obviously, Return of the Dark Knight kind of stuff.
I'm a big fan of Ronin and Martha Washington.
Oh yeah, both. Yeah, both.
Electro Assassin too.
Yep. Believe it or not, Mike Mignola in the early Hellboy stuff just had a huge impact on me. Like the way he was telling the story was incredible. And then it branches out, more into like regular authors you think about. So like Alan Dean Foster has always been one of my favorites, and I loved his stuff. And then, huge science fiction fans. So, there's stuff, Robert Heinlein and Anne McCaffrey and, some of the classics. And then somebody I was hooked on for a while was Tom Clancy, because I just loved the way he did like that. What Tim was just talking about, like this ebb and flow, right? Like he'd have like, okay, we're going to do all the talky stuff, and we're going to have this build up. And then there's going to be just like this monster fight scene, in modern warfare kind of way. Those are probably my top guys. Then you can start talking about movies, but then it gets to who actually wrote it. Like, who do you give the most credit for to Alien and Aliens? There's so many people involved in that process.
To answer Third Rail's question, I know he doesn't own the rights to Deadpool, but he does have some kind of
he gets royalties on that stuff.
Yeah, he gets royalties on it and things like that. So there's Marvel I don't know what their current structure of their contracts is or whatnot, but in those days they used to do like if you helped create a character, you would get royalties off of things and stuff like that. So I think it starts after, I know back in the day it used to start after 100K sales or something in single issue comics, which happened more often back in those days for Marvel. But so it may be different now. I don't know what the deals are now. But Rob Liefeld doesn't own Deadpool, but he does have a stake in Deadpool.
I heard that he at the time they made the deal that toys and merchandise had a higher percentage, and a lot of the characters he created became toys. I mean, those Toy Biz X-Force things.
Cable, Strife, Deadpool.
Yeah.
Still making Deadpool and Cable merchandise,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They're cool ideas, man. Rob Liefeld was awesome. And you can see the Kirby influence on all of those guys, especially Larson and Kirby. I mean, Larson and Kirby, of course. Larson and Liefeld in particular. I think you really, really see that influence on them. Brian, you got any other thoughts or questions, man?
I guess, is there anything you're reading these days that's exciting you?
Dude, who is it? Ablaze, right? They're bringing these European Conans.
The Sumerian or whatever.
Sumerian.
Yeah.
I haven't checked those out.
And these are really hardcore. Like, what it is they don't have the license for Conan, but the character is clearly Conan, and they call it the Sumerian because I guess the license was over there in Europe. So Ablaze is coming out with these single issues, but they're also collecting them into little hardcovers. And the cool thing is, there's these in Europe they came out with these big albums, right? These big books, and the collection is 2 of those stories in there, and it's also got the original text from the novel, right?
That's one of my favorite things, and I double checked. Yeah, in the graphic novels, they reprint that as well.
Yeah, so what's cool is you can read the comic story, and then you can read the novel and be like, "Oh, they totally could have used this, or this is better here, or that." And I mean, that's kind of really cool.
Have you read the newest one, The Hour of the Dragon or whatever?
I haven't. I haven't.
Whoever that artist is, oh my goodness, it's so painted. I'm like, I have to see this in a magazine format. I have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can go buy the album off of like Amazon UK in French and then get the issue, right?
That's true.
But yeah, the cool thing too is all the Conans are someone else's take on him, so you get to have this vision of Conan that's different, right? than your regular, and it just gives it a new flavor. So I've been reading those. And
I think Tim wants to work on Conan, y'all. You
Yeah.
better watch out. I think Doug and Tim could do a good Conan book. Now I'm thinking about it.
Heck yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I
that
guess
sounds
that's-
great. I'll check that out.
That's cool. Yeah, they're really good, Brian. I got the first volume in hardcover at the Deep. If you want to check it out, I have all the issues. It's really fun. I actually talk about it, Brian, on a show I do called the Weekly Comic Book Review. You should check that show out sometime, Brian.
Well, the one thing
I'll
I'd
try
add
it out
about that is the Conan is these were written some time ago, so there is. I mean, this is Conan, so there's some like misogyny and violence, and I mean, it's like pure Conan, right?
Yeah.
So take that with a grain of salt. Take that.
It means there's
into
lots of
consideration.
violence and nudity at times, and it's really awesome sometimes. But yeah, at times, yeah, obviously they're Conan stories, and we don't, approve of that lifestyle.
Yeah.
What was it Arnold said?
But we can read about it.
What was it he said? What is the purpose of life or something like that? What is life? And it's like, what was
It's
the
something
line?
so bad, like
Yeah, it's something. Hear the lamentation of the women. Or,
Yep, the lamentation
that's
of
the
the
way it
women.
ends. I don't remember the
Yeah.
part that leads into that. That's the
guess
main
what-
part I remember.
I guess we gotta do the Conan movie on PCP movie night at some point soon.
the one guy, the guy's son says something reasonable. What's the purpose of life? And he says something reasonable, and the
I
guy's
just
like,
want Taco Bell once a week with my homie
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
stories, man.
he's like, Conan, what's your purpose? And he's like, says the most gnarliest things. Like, okay.
To kill all my enemies, to hear the lamentations of the women, to drink
See
the
them driven
blood.
before you.
Yeah,
That's,
there's
I remember that
something-
part. Yeah.
It's so badass, actually, when you
Yeah.
think about it. I should get that shit put up on my hallway, like live, laugh, love. That's what I need to. What about you, Doug? What are you reading? What are you digging?
I'm just started checking out Rain. Have you guys seen that one from Image?
Yes.
Yes.
David
really cool
M.
book.
Boer and
Yeah.
Zoe Thorogood, I believe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I want to read that one. I haven't checked. I haven't picked those issues up yet.
Of course, picking up the new saga. Anything Brian K. Vaughan puts his hand on, I'm reading.
Heck yeah.
And then what is it? What's Scotty Young? He's writing a new one. Something in the dark.
The Me You Love in the Dark.
The Me You Love in the Dark.
I
I absolutely
love that
love
book.
that book.
Oh my
Like,
God.
What they're doing storytelling wise, I haven't seen in a long time. And I haven't seen it all put together in one book like this. Like the way they're just telling the story visually is so interesting to me.
Yes.
I'm gonna see
Yeah,
that.
I'm just really loving it.
Are there like some like fold out pages and things like that, or turning it?
Oh no, nothing like that. It's dude, honestly, it's just like the way they're doing like non sequiturs and all this like cool like storytelling stuff where like she'll be talking about something and they'll take you from where she's actually talking and they're like showing you stuff that may or may not relate to it.
Yeah.
And the artwork is beautiful and like his panel layouts are gorgeous. Yeah, he's just
I'll check that
killing it. Yeah.
He spots black so freaking well. In
Oh,
that book,
yeah.
is that Jorge Corona, I believe, right?
I think
And
so,
yeah, dude, it's in like there's this entity in this house that she's an artist with like artist block. And so she goes and rents this haunted house to like be inspired by. She goes there. It's actually haunted by some kind of entity. And they develop this like at first kind of touching, charming relationship. And then it goes very toxic and wild. And the way that the artwork is like, because they're also using music. And so they use the music notes to like flow through the pages. Oh my goodness. It's so freaking good. I'm glad you mentioned that one, Doug. That one's great.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites right now.
Well, yeah, I haven't read a lot of Scotty Young stuff, but I thought he was doing one of the best Marvel books recently. I mean, that Strange Academy was actually.
Oh yeah.
That was one of the better books they've had on the shelves recently.
And he's got Humberto's doing every single issue.
Yeah.
Like to
Every
find
one.
one
It never
artist doing
changed.
every issue at Marvel right now, that's unheard of. So
The thing
that's
too
good.
is because he's an artist, he picks some awesome artists.
Oh yeah.
They can-
He's smart
they-
about it.
Yeah, they like apply to the story. I think he's got another Image book. I don't know. I think I saw the solicitation. It looks interesting. There's like this cute
Twig?
little- yeah,
Twig. Yep.
Twig. Yeah.
That looks
Twig or
cool.
something. Yeah.
wonder what the deal is with that. So
Yeah, it looks really cool, man. It looks really freaking cool.
When you mentioned Brian K. Vaughan, have you read Pride of Baghdad?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Like I try to sell people on that book all the time. That's one of the best comic books.
Yeah, and I think what's tough is that if you have any kind of heart, it's going to make you cry.
Right.
And so I think people like, wait a minute, it's kind of sad, and like, yeah, there's going to be parts in it that like are going to make you upset.
Yeah.
I don't mind crying. I'm a grown man. I can cry whenever I want. So yeah, that's a beautiful book.
Oh yeah, I'm the same. I read We Three on an airplane and broke down crying on an airplane, and it was clearly
awesome.
that I was reading a comic book, on an airplane.
Yeah.
So I love that stuff. But that's that's Brian K. Vaughan too. He doesn't have any comics that that don't have some kind of element of shock and crying and all that stuff. So
he's so good. I'm so jealous of how he just continually puts out like amazing book after amazing book.
He makes it look so effortless.
Yeah.
Like it's nothing. Like this was just an afternoon for him putting this shit together. You know what I'm saying? When you see an artist where they've worked so hard and they know what they're doing. I think I saw Sergio Aragones talk about this where he goes, like, I did a sketch for someone. He's like, I paid $200 for the sketch you did in 20 seconds. He goes, no, you paid for 20 years of me learning how to do this in 20 seconds. Right. But Brian K. Vaughan does that, where you look at an artist, it just looks like they dash that shit out so fucking quick. And it's like, you don't see the work behind it. But Brian K. Vaughan's like that, where it just looks like, this is not fair.
Yeah.
This is not fair. This guy, oh, I wrote Lost. I'm a Hollywood writer. Oh, I'll do comic books and make it look so easy. Yeah, whatever. Screw you, Brian K. Vaughan. I'm just kidding. We love Brian K. Vaughan. If you ever want to be on the show, just let us know. All right. I got a question I want to ask Tim because Tim's here. So Tim, I'm working on my own book, right? Called Tapeworm Boy. It's not ever going to come out, but I am working on it, and I'm trying to develop these creatures, right? And my idea is that they're okay. So I'm just going to tell you, don't tell anybody this. We know the Venus flytrap, right? Well, all my characters center around the planet Venus. So I think Venus to me is populated by flies, right? Since we have to have Venus flytraps, they're Venus flies. So it's Baxter Stockman influenced with Jeff Smith rat creatures from Bone.
Yes.
So what do you think about my design here? I'm just curious.
Ooh.
And they're 4 wings because I was like, why not?
Oh yeah, that's cool. That's cool. They have a little stinger.
Yeah, stinger and fangs. Fangs are very important to me. Yeah.
I like
how
how
many eyes is that thing spot?
What's that?
How many eyes is that thing sporting?
It's just got 2, but I just did some hatching to make it look. It's like Baxter Stockman's face, basically.
How big are these things?
I don't know. I think they vary in size.
They look like they can fly, and then they just because their teeth stick out, they fly and they can just ram into you and stick on you. And you're like,
oh yeah, dude, yeah.
Suck your blood. And you're just
okay. Yeah, I was trying to think of something that like what would be easy to draw, like something, and they're furry. I don't know. Yeah, they don't have any limbs, any legs at all because Venus, you don't need limbs. You can't make it to the surface. The pressure will crush you. You get what I'm saying? So yeah,
that's pretty good. That could work.
Well, thank you very much, man. Thank you. We'll compare notes later on. I got your email now, so you can thank Doug for that. So I just wanted that, thank you so much, man. I plan on releasing them 1 page a year, starting in 2023. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, start small. Start with the small thing, not like a big 160-page thing right away.
Yeah. We're just gonna do 40 pages, and then we're gonna grow from there. So there you go. Okay, here's a question that we always ask of everybody because we're about to wrap this up because we've been here forever. We've been keeping you guys away from your time. And Doug, if you don't get that cover in time, I'm so sorry. Have either of you? I'll go individually. So we'll start with Tim. Tim, have you ever had a paranormal experience? Like, have you ever seen a UFO? You ever seen a ghost? You ever seen Jesus walk across the middle of the road while you're driving? I don't know.
I was really skeptic. When I was dating my wife, we had a date and there was an outdoor movie in the Capitol in Utah. And it's like up on this hill. And we were sitting there laying in the grass and I was looking straight up at the stars. Right. And I saw these little white specks that looked like stars, like way up there. And they were they were moving like super fast and then stopping on a dime, right? And moving like this. And I had never seen a UFO. I had always been like, I'm not going to believe it till I saw it. But I saw those, dude. And they were really small and they were moving like this. And they would stop and they would stay there. And then they'd be like, boom, boom, boom. And it was just like, it was pretty crazy. I was like, there's UFO.
Yeah.
So And then ghost stories. I haven't ever really had experience myself, but in my family, when someone dies, there's always a experience that happens close to their death. And we say, on my dad's side, we say that it's just them, their spirit saying it's okay, we're okay. So I have two stories. One was my grandmother passed, and she lives in Norway. So my parents flew over there, and instead of getting a hotel, they stayed in the house, right? And at night, my dad, they were staying in my grandmother's bedroom, and the house was locked up. And in the middle of the night, they're the only people there. Middle of the night, both my dad and my mom, the doorknob on the bedroom turns, and then lets go and goes whoosh, turns again. So they sit up and they see it. Doorknob turns, right? So my dad gets up, goes and looks through the house, the doors, everything's locked, not a soul in there. That's it. And my mom says, "We're getting a hotel. Let's go." Right? So, and that was in this old house in Norway that was like, who knows, 200 years old, right? And then the other one is I had a great grandfather, whatever. I don't know how far back he was, but he was a lighthouse keeper in Norway for the royalty. And they lived on this island in the lighthouse. And he would take a boat back to the mainland to get supplies and come back. And they had this room off to the side of their house that was like a wet room. And he would have his raincoat and his slicker and all this on. Because it would rain, he'd be out in the boat. And they'd be in this room. And what he'd do is when he'd arrive at the house, he'd bring the box up there and he'd throw a pebble up on the roof, and it would roll down and hit the rain grade. And it was by the servant's room. So the servant would hear that and he'd know, oh, he's here. I'll go put the kettle on. Right. So then one night he was older. He went out for supplies on the boat, and it was raining a little bit. And the servant hears the pebble hit the roof and roll back. Oh, he's here. So he goes and puts the kettle on, the tea on, and waits and waits and waits, and he never comes, right? So then he goes in the slicker room, the wet room, and his rain gear stuff is not in there. So then he goes down to the dock and the boat's not there, right? So then I think it was like 2 weeks later, his body washes on shore, right? And they find the boat, and in his pocket is his stopwatch. So they know the exact time. And he had a big mark on his head, like the sail threw around and knocked him off. So kind of figured that out. But because of his watch, they knew exactly what time he had died, right? And it was before the servant heard the rock go up on the. So I have those two stories in my family and stuff when we talk about them, and that watch is still in my fam. Like, my uncle has it, right, with the exact time that he fell into the water. So,
bruh, you got to get a hold of that watch, hold yourself up into like a cabin one time for like 3 months and just see what happens.
Yeah, that can't possibly go bad.
Yeah, right? Yeah. I got a story idea, Brian. I'm going to send this to you later.
Okay. All right.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, man. And yeah, eyes above,
that's cool.
bro, because they're up there. You got to pay attention, because I've seen them. You just got to pay attention. They're out there. Doug, what about you?
I've only had like one real paranormal experience that I can like say for sure was like paranormal. And so I'm like a true agnostic. So like I admit that I don't have a clue how anything works. And so like I don't know how God works or the universe or any of that kind of stuff. But at one point we had to put down one of our cats. Tailless cat, so there was a clear silhouette, right, that you'd be able to identify. And I woke up in the middle of the night one night and stared up, and there was a shadow on the door into my bedroom of that cat. And, at first I'm like, oh, this is grief playing tricks on my mind and that kind of stuff, until I realized our other cat, the surviving sister, is sitting on the edge of the bed, staring straight up at the shadow.
Oh my God.
And so, and you're like, well, wait, if the cat sees it, like, then clearly I'm not seeing things. And so, like, me and this cat stared at that shadow for 5 minutes, and it was still there the whole time. And so, like, I'm just going to go back to sleep. Finally went back to sleep. Woke up like 2 hours later, and the shadow's gone. So, like, no change in lighting in the house, none of that kind of stuff. And so that's like the only like paranormal experience I have. But to this day, like the fact that the cat saw it made me go, that might be real.
Bro,
Like,
every time my cat just goes and starts staring at the wall or something, I'm like,
what is it?
I'm like really freaked out, man. No, I feel that, man. We had David Papose on the channel, and unfortunately he had a pet who had just recently passed away. He told a story very similar where he's like, and I have a cat that I lost last year that was very near and dear to my heart, Creamsicle, and I've had experiences like that. And my cat Ariel, who is the surviving sister, noticing it as well. So that's awesome. All dogs go to heaven, all cats stay here to torment us, I guess. It's scary.
I love mine. So we've got 3 now. Because the sister eventually did pass away, which I will say, my wife has heard me say this. The cat that passed away, Tim knew Rita. He took care of her every now and then for us. Rita was the love of my life. Like, I love that cat more than I loved any other human being on this planet.
Yeah.
But now we've got 3 other rescues, and they're growing on me pretty quick.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I remember
knew I'd like
when I
you,
took care of
Doug.
his cat. Doug told me they were going away. He told me, he's like, if anything happens to this cat, I will kill you.
He was serious as shit,
And
bro.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, I'll kill you and I'll mine it for a story, bro.
I like looked in his eyes. He was not joking. So I was like, I'm not messing this up.
Did you get texts every 3 hours? How's she doing? How's it going?
Send me a picture.
Dude, yeah. You laugh. That is now a condition of anybody watching our cats, is they have to send me a picture once a day when I'm away.
No, I get you.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I'm worried that they're going to, I take my responsibility of taking these rescue cats, and 2 of them clearly came from bad homes. I do not want them to live another bad day. You know what I mean? Like, I want the rest of their life to be as good as possible. So I take that responsibility very seriously. And, plus I'm a sensitive, overly sensitive kind of guy.
Yeah. Well, now I got to go and spend time with my cat. So thank you all so much for being here. This has been a great show. Thank you all so much for checking out the show. So once again, where can we find you on socials? And Beware the Eye of Odin, June, Image Comics, pre-order it right now. There you go. FOC hasn't dropped yet. You still got plenty of time to make sure you get your copy, as many as you want.
Yes,
Multiple
please.
order it, y'all. Let's show the PCP Army effect. Is that a thing? I don't know, but let's see what happens.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's Odland Tim. And that's pretty much it. Instagram. I'm also on Facebook. You can find me there. So
Nice.
And for me, I'm on Facebook and Instagram under Doug.Wagner13, and on Twitter at Doug_Wagner. So pretty easy to find me. My face is everywhere on them, so it's pretty easy to figure out with my big old head.
Hell yeah. Y'all go pre-order this book as soon as I get a chance to read it, and I hope that these fine gentlemen give me a chance to read it before it comes out so I can drop an advanced review for you guys and let you know exactly what I thought about it. So I'm really excited for the book. It sounds fantastic. Thank you all for joining us. Doug, Tim, you are now friends of the show.
all right.
That means that anytime you want to come on, you got something you want to talk about, something you want to plug, just shoot the shit. You holler at me. Me and Brian will get it set up. We'll fit you in.
Yeah,
Right,
it was
Brian?
a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having us on.
Yes, thanks.
Oh, absolutely. Brian, any final thoughts before we dip out?
No, just
Now I'd like 2 eggs over hard.
every time. Never prepared.
Never prepared. No, for real, though, final thoughts.
Yeah, just absolutely loving comics. And it was great talking to you guys and learning about your new book coming out, and really excited for it.
Thanks.
So
Awesome.
All right, PCP Army, you know what to do. Go order Beware the Eye of Odin. Do it now. We command you. Anyways.